In the name of God, the beneficent, the merciful, may God's peace and blessings abide with all of the righteous people, and may God include us amongst them. I want to talk about a couple of things in this series. First of all, let me introduce my channel, which is still under construction. The main theme will be about God, man, and money. And I would be giving my thoughts and sharing my knowledge and information about the market, about investing, and specifically about the stock market. And I'll be relating each topic to the scripture and to something that is relevant for us as human beings, and something also that is relevant for our economic well-being. So in this series, I will be talking about the international crisis that we are witnessing now, which is the war in Ukraine, or the invasion of Russia, the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces under their leader or their commander-in-chief, President Vladimir Putin. This is perhaps the latest development in the series of wars and conflicts that have been happening in our lifetime at this time. So, what can we share about these? First of all, let's start the discussion with a scriptural background or with a scriptural reference. Somewhere in the Quran, in chapter 22, verse 39, 40, and sometime in the life of the Muslim community at the beginning of their history, God revealed these verses that permission has been given to those against whom war is being waged, that they should defend themselves, and that God will help them and grant them victory over their enemies. And then the next ayah talks about that Allah or God indeed does ward off the aggression of one group by the means of others. So this is how balance is created in our world. There's always an aggressor, and there's always a defender of somebody who's defending their right group given to them by God, or other kind of rights that they may be entitled to. So first of all, let's ask ourselves the question: how does this apply to this current situation? I would say there are two parts to this verse. One is that there's an establishment of the fact that there is a time, there could be a time when somebody tried to take off or try to take something that is not rightful due to them, the right of another, some other people or group may want to take it by force sometimes. And it's up to the people who have the right to stand up against them and try to ward off their aggression. So that, in fact, is going to be a fact of life. Then the other part of it is that God promises help for the particular group that is mentioned in this verse, which was the Muslims. So we cannot say that anybody who are trying to defend themselves against their enemies are guaranteed victory. But it does, in fact, justify or approves or encourages people not to give up their right without a fight. Because if that happens, and nobody will be able to keep anything. So then in another verse, we are actually told to be prepared for peace, to always live in peace, but to be prepared for war, because war is always, aggression is or conflict is a factor of life, and it's always threatening peace. And as we build our homes and as we secure ourselves, we must build our defenses and be ready in case somebody thinks that we can be easily run over and our rights can be easily taken, so that they think twice before they make any move. So that verse is that prepare for them, secure your means of defense in preparation for a possible aggression from your enemy. So we have to keep our defenses updated and ready, and that's the fact of life. However, or how much this may be related to this or not is something that I think I've tried to cover in that brief introduction. So now let's look at history of conflicts in our world, and I will divide these into two portions or two categories. History of in the past, whether among religious people or religious communities, as we read a lot in the scriptures, in the Quran, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Christian Bible, about so many wars and so many conflicts, which happened in history, and there were also similar wars and conflicts also among people that we may not consider to be religious people. People were fighting over all kinds of things, over nationality, race, nationality, resources, and land, and all kinds of things. All of those wars have taken place in history. But let's come to a more recent history. If anybody had lived, I would say before I was born, if anybody had lived, and we have survivors of the Second World War, people who were born around or before 1933 through 1945. 1933 through 1945, we're still much less than a century or 100 years, because we are still in 2022 now. So that period of, that block of time, which was the time that the Second World War was fought at different levels and stages, was a very, very scary, very difficult time for those who were able to bear arm at that time. So I'm not going to go too much into the history of or the stages of the war, but I want to say that those of us that didn't live that experience, we can't really realize how much we have escaped in terms of being exposed to war. The only people that will be exempt from this, my description will be those pockets or those small areas where war persisted for too long, like in the Southern Sudan, like in Eritrea, like in any of these. So it looked like most of the battles that took place in the Second World War were centered around Europe essentially, and Japan, and all of these other countries. And then later on, we see prolonged wars too in other parts of the world. So, like I said before, that that background is important, but it's not the focus of my presentation or my some discussion here. So, but let's look at one thing that is very important, crucial from that history of the Second World War. That is the fact that it produced a kind of a definitive world order. That world order is what we, people of my own generation, were born into. And that world order that was the outcome of the Second World War still survives until today. And it survived in terms of the emergence of two superpowers. Yes, the United States of America, which is perhaps you might say the leader of the Allied forces that won the war, and it also was survived by the emergence of the communist bloc. And so those of us that lived in the post, were born in the post-Second World War, whether in the 50s or 60s or 70s, we were born into this new world order. Some of the features of that world order at the beginning was the existence or emergence of two superpowers. One was the communist-led Soviet republics, and the other one is the American-led so-called West or free world. So it also produced resulted in the formation of the United Nations, and it also resulted in identifying certain rights for individuals and for countries of nations, such as the territorial integrity of every nation, and all these kind of things. And it also was survived by the birth of the two distinct economic systems, which is the capitalist economic system versus the socialist communist economic system. The socialist communist economic system remained, but it collapsed with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. But before 1991, let me share some of the things that we lived by at that time. Like I said before, one of them is the awareness that there are two superpowers that are ruling the world and influencing almost everything. And there was any war or any conflict, they were behind that. So those were the communist bloc or the capitalist bloc led by the United States of America. And these two superpowers were trying to spread their ideologies and try to extend the spheres of their influence, and they were also in an antagonistic relationship with one another. So during that time, let's look at some of the particularly sad conflicts or wars or invasions that took place at that time. During that time, before the collapse of the Soviet republics in 1991, I want to mention two forms of invasions, two types of invasions that took place. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and there might have been other types of invasion, but the other invasion that I wanted to mention actually occurred much later and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is the invasion of the United States of America, the invasion of Afghanistan again by the United States of America after the 9/11 that happened in 2000 or 2001. So any of these invasions kind of led to a prolonged war, and it tested the resolve of the people who considered that to be unfair, to be a great act of aggression, and to be an attempt to subdue them and make them do their will and take over their land. And it also tested the powers of those superpowers that thought like, for whatever reasons, they had justified in their actions. So if we didn't see the stages of the Second World War and all kind of battles and counter battles and things that took place, at least those of us that witnessed the development, later development, we saw this kind of forms of aggression and invasions are actually taking place during our lifetime. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, many of the republics got independence, and Ukraine was one of these countries. So Ukraine must have got her independence sometime around after 1991, and it must have enjoyed that status for about 30 years now. But for whatever reasons, the Russia regrouped, or the new central government for the Russian people, which was headquartered in Moscow, and continue to make efforts to recapture or or annex some of those republics. You probably remember what happened to Georgia, the state of Georgia, and then the state of Chechnya, to Chechnya, and any of these other smaller republics that used to be part of the Russian communist bloc before, being re-annexed and reconquered in a way by Russia. And somebody would have thought that it would have been over, but the event that took place recently has proved us wrong. So that being the background, both from the scriptural and from a historical perspective. So let's go into some important things about why this is happening. We really don't need that much about. We know why it is happening. We know that Russia, from the perspective, from the side of Russia, they have always been opposed to. They've always been wanting to reunite their people. So nationalism is one reason why, because the creation of Ukraine created a cleavage among Russian people who are part of the people who ended up in another country. But if we may try to check this by the statement that was made by the Kenyan representative to the United States, there are so many empires in the past and so many nations in the past that were composed of distinct races or peoples that, as a result of the Second World War, as a result of these wars and as a result of colonization and all kind of things, and invasion and counter occupation and all these things, people have always been separated from their own people. And so he cited the African example that this had happened in the sense that most of our countries, or all of our countries, were actually, the boundaries were drawn for us by colonialists. And so you could have, for example, part of the same people that were indigenous, that were native to, say, like Nigeria. You could have some of them in Dahomey or in any of those, in Cameroon and any of those other people. So, but what happens is that we need to we need to move that past empire mentality because it looks like it's not going to be possible that is not going to worth the effort trying to, but we can actually reunite with our people, even across boundaries, across borders, and that's the way that we need to go now. Because once a country become independent, it's wrong for another more powerful country to say they want to annex or cut a piece of it because they think that some of their people are there. So. The other reason why that they are mentioning is that one of the major alliances that came to be formed after the Second World War is the defense alliance that is called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this appears to be perhaps the most powerful alliance or military alliance in the world today. There are other counterweights, but they are not as important either militarily or economically. And so since Russia has been left outside of these things, Russia has always felt threatened by the expansion of this organization, especially along its borders. So I think that's perhaps some of the reasons, some of the, I would say, told and untold reasons why Russia said the reasons that Russia have for the invasion. Whether that is enough to justify an invasion of this type is left for everyone who is witnessing this occasion to make a determination about that. The other thing that is the untold reasons is that, for example, I would say that Russia has been like in the limbo for quite a long time, and economically is not even like second to the United States of America, and I doubt if militarily it is second. So for a power, a superpower that used to be that very important, and that's so fully militarized and with all these nuclear bombs and all these kind of things. For that, in a power like that to become like almost like nothing and not being in the second or even in third position, because of as of today, most people will agree that economically, at least, it's very obvious that China is much more economically prosperous than Russia and all of, any of these other countries. So, and militarily too, perhaps. So, the untold reason is that Russia is probably becoming frustrated and feeling left behind and feeling that the only way that it could regain its influence is by extending their territory, and so the another untold reason will be, well, most of these conflicts they are usually engineered. The main cause will be nationalism, or the main cause will be greed, or the desire to have resources that belong to others, to capture the resources that belong to others in order to, you know, um, you know, um, grow their own nation. So it is very clear that Ukraine, whether when it was part of the Russia or Soviet Republic, happened to be one of the very prosperous areas, and it's also like probably militarily, strategically, there's a lot of strategic military installations that Ukraine is being able to further develop, and also there's probably a more economic progress taking place there that Russia would have, envy, or would have desired that they're able to keep within the republic. So there could be a whole lot of other reasons. This matter actually, especially the aspects of nationalism, is best discussed by my Professor Khalid Blankenship, in his presentation. But I do realize that his presentation, as thorough as it was, it didn't really cover some of the things that I really feel like it's important for us to talk about. Um, so, because I don't want this series to be too long, I'm going to divide it into two parts, and I'm going to stop this in the next 2-3 minutes. Let me see how much it is I can cover. Let's talk about the economic implication of these crises before anything else. As I said before, the desire for um, annexation is driven by the greed and the desire to have more resources and to have more access to, and to have more influence. So, but economically, what does this translate to? It translates into a crisis of energy, a crisis of a terrible economic war, in the sense that, let's look at it first of all from this perspective that we just came out of the pandemic, and the world is just trying to recover from that, and economies of the various economies like the US economy, Chinese economy, and all these things, you're just trying to recover. So, and anything like this that would shake the entire world, who is likely to put a halt to the recovery. And so it's affecting market activity all over the world. The second point is that it's also an energy crisis, because Russia realizes that its strategic position in the oil economy, in the oil market, because Russia is probably more important than even Saudi Arabia in this matter. And also because especially Russia is more strategically placed for Europe, because it supplies much of the energies that are consumed in Europe, especially gas. And so it's an attempt to weaponize that economic opportunity. It's an attempt to weaponize energy because it's, and so Russia may have calculated that it's likely to be profiting or benefiting from that crisis because the world will actually don't have any alternative to that, and even if they do, they're going to have to pay a big price. So the third impact that this is creating is that there's also a whole lot of other resources, a whole lot of other products that Russia produces, like say for example wheat, and all of these other materials that are used in the that are going to be vital um, um, for the electric vehicles and stuff like that. So there must have been a calculation that this is going to shake the market and is going to be to the favor of Russia because that's how it was expected to play out. But how is it playing out in the real sense? First of all, Russia tried to make some type of alliance with China, and I think it's now developing into a military alliance too. But all of that is proven to be futile. So for now, the oil price has gone up very very much, and there's a lot of pain in the pump at the pump now. And so the crude oil price rose from about 80 to almost 130, on it's probably still in that range now. So that's going to create, but that's all. That the effect of that in the United States of America have been felt painfully, but the effects is actually going to be impacting European countries' economies much in a much worse fashion. Nevertheless, the it presents an opportunity for the West to rally their forces again. And it looks to me now that it is also reinstating the central or the leadership role of the United States of America, because America has been able to get other countries, the Western Bloc, to be unified against Russia in this. So they are introducing what we know now as sanctions, and these sanctions are different from any type of sanctions that have been placed on any country in the past. So what this is leading to is that he's giving the West a new weapon to fight their war, a new weapon that was never used before, that is now being tested, which is the power of sanctions and power of the removal from SWIFT and all kind of things that are even difficult to explain, that are meant to really punish Russia. If this go through, regardless of whether Russia wins the war or loses the war, and it's very likely that it will lose the war, it's going to have a lot of devastating effect on the Russian economy. And some of the analysts are actually saying it's like taking Russia back about 100 years, back economically. So if this could have been done in such a manner that the bloodshed is avoided, that would have been even better. So that's just what the situation is now, and we need to be aware of this. So right now, what kind of investment opportunities does this situation present? It's very hard to say, and not really hard to say, but what I'm thinking is that it's obvious from this that there's a new awakening of a new realization of a new leaning, a new wake-up call for every country to be more mindful about their defense systems. And so one of the most crucial opportunities this is presenting, that there will be defense-related stocks are going to be rising, energy-related stocks are going to be rising now. And all of those stocks that were rising before and they're now falling, it might take time for them to get back up. So you just need to pay attention and watch and look and study, and then but if your portfolio is down now, that's just the normal thing. So So next time I will be talking about specific stocks in this connection. Thank you very much. Bye bye.